Hi everyone, I'm Rick Zanotti, and this is Life Edge, because life just doesn't have to be mediocre. I am joined today by my good friend and co-host, Dr. Susan Nash. How are you, Susan?
Oh, I'm fine, but I'm super thrilled today because a longtime friend and person I really hear is a special guest today.
That sounds good, and we will introduce her in a moment. Here we go. Anything happen? Hello? This show is sponsored by Relate Corporation. Visit us at www.relatecasts.net. Thanks. And Susan, would you like to do the honors?
Oh, yes, absolutely. So, our special guest is Carolyn Steinhoff, who currently lives in New York, but we met when she lived in Tulsa. And we just had a wonderful experience, had wonderful experiences together there. She was teaching writing classes in the schools and for the city of Tulsa, in Tulsa. And we just connected and we collaborated on a few things. But I've just been such an admirer, not only of her poetry, which is amazing, but also in her approach to teaching. So just welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to have found you again and to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, you're quite welcome. So, well, I guess we'll get started just by asking you a little bit about yourself. I mean, how you got started writing and a little bit about your background.
Okay, yeah. How did I get started writing? I have to say, I think it was when I was like 4 and I copied some letters and realized that they were words and was just unbelievably thrilled. So I always wrote and really, loved to write and thought I would be a writer. I don't know why, really. I just thought for most of my life, even as a child, I assumed I would be a writer. I wrote stories and stuff when I was a little kid, wrote little books and everything. um, so I don't really know why exactly. I just always liked to read and read all the time and liked to write and been doing it forever.
Now, Carolyn, would you say that the art of writing is kind of dying off nowadays? I mean, we deal with a lot of college students and they don't know how to write. Most of them don't write. And it's just such a shame because it's such a wonderful thing to be able to do, to write. Even if, and by writing, it doesn't mean you just type. A lot of people think, I type. No, write. Yeah, I type. No, not typing. Not hitting a keyboard. Can you actually write and actually come up with stories and other things? And whether you're doing anything in writing, we just notice it's just not prolific like it was in the old days. If you go to a Barnes and Noble, for example, you see two age groups primarily, usually, at least in the ones I've been to, and we've been to quite a few. Younger, very young, before their teens usually. And then you start seeing that jump up to the 40s, 50s, and on up, not too much in between. What do you think?
That I'm sure that's true. Yeah, I haven't been in many Barnes and Nobles recently, I have to say, but definitely. I mean, I taught writing, just your basic composition, in college classes for a number of years, and absolutely, I had to teach the students sort of from square one, is how I would always say. I think that I have really a lot of opinions about the way writing is taught, which aren't mostly I don't approve of it. I don't like the way it's taught really because I feel that the creative dimension to it, which is really what I feel you're asking about,
Mm-hmm.
like you're saying, writing from yourself, from your own perceptions and perspectives. That's just not what schools encourage or ask for. Mostly children are asked to write based on sort of templates and forms, and
Mm-hmm.
then in the older, middle school, high school, they're writing assignments with topics, and you're supposed to write according to forms again. And same thing in college, and asking people to have an opinion, to have an idea, to engage with something in the world and think about it and have thoughts about it. We just don't value that for students. So I feel like I always wanted to encourage them to, or give them ways to write about their own lives and their own experiences more, so that they could find that exhilaration of expressing something true for them. So I think that's what I think it's the way we teach it a lot.
I agree, and I think there's a huge disconnect because students who say, well, I say, okay, what are some books that you would recommend? And they typically talk, well, a lot of them talk about things that they read while they were in high school, and have become aware of like the young adult fiction today versus when I was reading young adult fiction is a lot of it's similar in the sense that it talks about tragedies. For example, Follow My Leader was all about a boy who feels guilty because he threw a firecracker and it made a boy hit it near a boy's eye and went blind. And he has a seeing eye dog named Leader. Well, I think there are also other things that have to do with really intense issues that young adults or children, basically adolescents, are going through. And yet, I mean, nobody's asked to write about that. They read about it, but they don't write about it. How can we change that?
Yeah. I think I'm not in the classroom anymore, so I don't have super current thoughts or experiences with it right now. But I think to change it, teachers can ask students to write. Maybe reading those books and then having them just free write about what connections they feel to what they're reading, and then going from there. That's sort of what I did. I always started with students just writing a story about something important. I called it, I want them to find a burning question, I called it. And I would have them write about something that's happening to them, that they're engaged with right now, or that's happening, or that is really taking up a lot of their thoughts and focus, and write a story about it. And then going from there to finding a topic and a research question or whatever, So I think that kind of thing can be good.
Now I see something flashing up. That's your new book.
Yes, it is. It is also on Barnes & Noble, I have to point out, because personally I don't buy from Amazon, but it's on Barnes & Noble and Amazon. Thank you for showing that.
No, so what's this book about?
That's great.
It's a book of poems. It's my second book from Nash Press. My first one was called Under the World. It's poems. Yeah.
Well, I remember years ago, you were a huge admirer of John Ashbery.
Yeah.
What made you like John Ashbery back then?
Back then, well, I started reading his poems when I was in my, I'd say, mid-20s. And I just found a book of his when I asked a bookstore worker, poets that I would like, because I liked Wallace Stevens a lot and what they would recommend. And they gave me a book of Ashbery's Tennis Court Oath, I think. And at first, when I started reading those poems, I was really angry because I felt I didn't understand. I don't know what this is. And it made me feel that he was trying to just make me feel stupid. And on purpose. And I think a lot of people do feel that, remembering how I felt helps me understand people's reaction to art of any sort that they're not familiar with. But I feel that he completely broke new ground in language and in using language. Well, so what happened with me was reading it, he won like 3 prizes in 1 year. I think the National Book Award and 2 other huge prizes. I forget which ones, but I just thought, well, the people who award those prizes have some reason that they gave those to him. It can't just be pure dreck or, so I want to know why, like, what is it they saw? So I just kept reading them. And what happened was it kind of just transformed my experience of reading them. Just completely was different after a while, where I just found them to be fascinating, and you certainly can't make head or tails of them in a normal way. But that was fascinating to me. And he led me to what I did is I tried writing without, like, every time I noticed that I was trying to make a point or get to a point, I would try to veer away from it as far as I could. Because I did notice before I read him and in writing poems that I kept finding I was sort of setting up a dichotomy between 2 points of view and then trying to resolve it, even if I didn't want to do that or mean to. So I thought, well, what if I just don't do that? And I just don't try not to say anything or to any particular thing. Don't have in mind something I want to say. What would happen? And what was so crazy was that I found it was terrifying to me. I felt really, really, it was really scary for some reason. And that fascinated me. Like, what on earth could be why would it scare me so much to not allow myself to make a point in writing something? So that made me want to do it more, just because I wanted to see what's going on with that. So, I just kept doing that, and at a certain point, it was just this sense of freedom of lifting away. And I realized that language can never not mean. I don't have to make it mean something. It does mean something. No matter what you do, if you write down a string of words, even if they're not syntactically a sentence, as with the parts of a sentence and all of that, the words have meaning. And I can't take that away, and they convey. So other people who speak the language, who read or speak English, who read English, get meaning from those words. So I don't have to try to make them mean something. I can just write words and see what happens. So that was a really freeing, completely different experience. And that sent me in this certain path, I guess, or direction of writing poetry. So, and I do feel that he's John Ashbery. I did actually meet him a couple times at readings. I went to hear him in New York when I lived in Tulsa, and talking to him after the reading. Yeah, I said,
That's amazing.
yeah, it was because, yeah. So I said to him that I felt a lot of people imitate him, especially earlier in maybe the 90s, and when he was first breaking out into the mainstream of, not that there is a mainstream of poetry, but more people heard of him, and he was recognized as a great poet. So I said, I feel a lot of people misunderstand what you're doing. They think that it's about idioms or play on words and stuff like that. But I don't know. I think, to me, what you're doing, it's like your words are just there. They're just there. And I went like this, and he looked at me and he went, yes. So that was like the most, fantastic moments of my life for him to say that. But it's like he doesn't have the slightest bit of he's like doing the complete opposite of making a point in any way. he's just sort of language is flowing out. And he has said that it's like he's writing the way our thoughts are, the way it is to think. And that seems to be very true. So you just can't get any sort of like, all other forms of language, there's some kind of agenda that they have, that the writer wants you to agree with them in some way, or to convince you of something, or to feel identification. Like in fiction, they want you to, I think generally want you to feel a sense of, I relate to this character or this event, this situation. But poetry, I feel, doesn't have any agenda, and Ashbery certainly has no agenda. The words are simply there. And so it's like it's neither here nor there. It's just this poise, this equipoise right in the center. It's centered so that it's completely balanced. So you can never go into one direction or another. It's just always just existing in the moment, and that's it.
I love that. And the other thing too, like, okay, when you're talking about Ashbery, thinking of structure as open versus, say, Shakespearean sonnet or Petrarchan sonnet, where, especially Petrarchan, there is a structure that sort of makes a structure that creates a pattern that automatically does some kind of meaning. Kind of reminds me of the Islamic calligraphy in mosques, where they repeat over and over and over to show the resonance and in infinity of meaning when it comes to or divinity. And so, like, a good sonnet or a good poem or anything that will have that, like you mentioned, it kind of pointed to that, is just like this infinitude of interpretive possibility. And then it's rhythm that reflects and refracts on itself. And the problem with a lot of doggerel poems is that they just it's actually like they flatten out the possibilities. So they're just like, oh, so boring and awful to read.
Yeah. There is a thing of, for me, a value that I want to, poetry that I want to read, and I hope I aspire to, let's say, to have be true of my poems, is that you can come back to the great poems that to me are great. You can read them forever, over and over, and you never say, okay, I'm done. I read that now, and I don't need to. There's always, because you're different when you come to it, because, it's a different day or a different year. So you're different than you were before when you read it, for one thing, but then it interacts with where you are and who you are right then in that particular place and point in time. And you find things in it, or you just, not even things you might be able to articulate, but it just strikes you or engages you in a different and deeper way than it did. So that to me is what I want to read, and that's what poems that I read over and over. So I've read, there are some poets, John Ashbery, and others that I read whenever I'm writing. I read them for a while first. So, and there's just, it's a whole reality in a way that they put you into, a way of being. So yeah, definitely. And another thing about Ashbery is that he did write me a blurb, but he called it an endorsement, which is such a nicer word than blurb, which is an ugly word. But
wow, that's amazing. Wow, I'm super impressed. Wow.
I know. It's a definite high point of my entire writing life. He wrote me this incredible, on my first book, because he's passed away. It was so amazing because everything was worked into this amazing sort of synchronicity or whatever, that I sent him my manuscript through this gallery where he showed his art, collages, which are fabulous, in New York. And he didn't answer, and I didn't expect him to answer. I mean, I just sent it, whatever. I'll just do it. To ask him to write a blurb, and the book was late coming out, so it took much longer than expected. And I just even sort of forgot, I didn't dwell on the fact that I had sent this to him because I never thought he'd answer. But then he emailed me long after the date the book was supposed to come out, but it wasn't out, and he said, "I'm so sorry that I took so long to reply. I was in rehab.
Oh no.
And here is my endorsement for your book." So it was just so astonishing. And what's astonishing too is that I felt like, especially the first part of it that he wrote, it wasn't as though he was writing about the poems as I think of them when they've already been like in a book. Not that, that's not a common experience for me, but when they're out there, someone's read them, they've been around for a long time. He was seeming to write about what it was like for me to write, what I felt and thought, and where I was in my state of being in writing the poems. So it just felt like he was speaking to me in that point of actually where I am when I'm writing the poems. And when I'm writing the poems, I'm reading his poems almost most of the time. I read them when I'm writing poems plus other poets. So it's just such a, this sense that he was getting from my poems what I was thinking and being when I was writing them. And when I was writing them, I was reading his poems. So that it's just,
I love it.
I have a picture of him on my fridge.
Wow.
Well, Carol, we are almost out of time, but we always ask somebody questions. One question in particular. Susan, do you want to ask the question?
Well, okay. So this is Life Edge. So Carolyn would like to know what it is in your life, what attribute or anything that you believe has given you an edge or your edge.
If I have an edge, do I have an edge? Well, edge could be, I'm just, I didn't know about this question. So
Sorry.
Edge could be, no, it's fine. But I hear, there's this thing, emotional charge, that I used to talk with students about. So a lot of words have emotional charge, and edge for me is a double. It has a positive and a negative, because like being on edge is like, being, so, what gives me an edge is I do feel on edge a lot, I guess partly because of the crisis condition that our world is in and our planet. But also I guess I have an edge as far as being, I think I perceive a lot that a lot of people don't perceive. It's not a great thing necessarily. I'm not saying it's great, but it's true. So, I see and get things around. I'm aware of things that I think that helps me in writing poetry, but, or at least poetry helps me with dealing with that, being like that. But I guess that's something that's both puts me on edge and also gives me an edge if I can figure out good ways to use it.
That's good.
Oh, that's wonderful. I love that.
And it sounds like it sounds like that gift is either a blessing or a curse sometimes, right?
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Yes. I think it's actually more of a curse to me, but yeah. But you try to find the good things you can do. You should use it to help you if you can. That's
great. Well, Carolyn, we appreciate you coming on, sharing a little bit about yourself and what you do and writing and all the importance of writing. So we look forward to seeing you again, and good luck on your new book.
Thank you so much. I'm so grateful to have been able to talk with you both, and it's been a pleasure, real pleasure.
Pleasure's ours. Right.
I'm thrilled.
And for all you watching, please subscribe to the show. If you have any questions for Carolyn, you can put them below in the show, and we'll be sure to either answer them for you or have Carolyn answer herself. Have a good one,
All right.
and we will see you folks next week. Thanks again, Carolyn.
Thank you.
Thank you.